The Effects of Positive Relationships on Students with Trauma in an Elementary Classroom by Danielle Mills-Bowser. Introduction. What is trauma? Trauma, according to SAM-HSA in 2005, results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. I chose this topic of study due to the fact that the majority of my education career has focused on students who have sustained various levels of trauma. Working with these types of students can be challenging and disheartening when they aren't making the same level of progress as other students in the class. Over the course of my experience, I have witnessed the positive effects of relationship building with these types of students. The more in-depth I researched the topic, I realized how crucial it is to interact and build rapport when working with students. Trauma affects students in the classroom, and that is proven. Jennifer Dodds in 2012 explains that 25% to 45% of youth have experienced one or more traumatic events before the age of 16. Trauma can affect all aspects of a child's life, including their behavior and academics in the school setting, which directly affects educators. So what does this mean for educators? It means that educators will more than likely be faced with the challenges that educating a student with trauma brings. Currently, there is a limited view of research on best practices to utilize with these students, in large part due to the fact that trauma can present itself in a wide range of characteristics. For example, one student who has sustained trauma might become aggressive and violent, while another student will completely shut down and become nonverbal. However, one theme that has presented itself more frequently in research that is supportive and caring relationships with staff in the classroom. Therefore, the purpose of this study is to analyze a small class of elementary students who have sustained trauma to discover the impact on relationships of students and academics and behaviors. There will be limitations on this study. All of the participants in this study are in a small transitional classroom in a suburban elementary school, and they all have documented trauma and behaviors and academics stemming from their specific traumas. Educators in a mainstream classroom may not have the background on their students that are presented in this study. In addition, students in this study are offered therapeutic services and other strategies geared to assist students with trauma. The utilization of numerous strategies may make it difficult to focus solely on the impact of the teacher-student relationship on these students' academic and behavioral growths. I have hypothesized that there will be a definite relationship between building staff and student relationships on students' academic and behavioral growth within an elementary school classroom. The research question will be covered three main questions that will be addressed in this study. The specific characteristics of relationship building that are most effective when building rapport with students with trauma. How does a positive teacher-student relationship affect academics and behaviors? And how can educators utilize relationship building in the classroom? It all comes down to discovering the effects on academics and behaviors in the classroom when student-teacher relationships are developed and fostered. The literature review. Jennifer Dodds in 2015 explains that traumatic stress can affect people of all ages and walks of life. No population is exempt. Scott Larson also points out that positive relationships greatly reduce stress, which will have a positive impact on students struggling with trauma. This literature review will be broken down into four basic areas: discussing trauma, recognizing trauma, benefits of relationships, and forming positive relationships, which will all hopefully illustrate the need for more research in this area. Trauma. Trauma can occur from a variety of reasons. These can be physical or mental abuse, divorce, addiction, loss, catastrophic events that occur, and any event that has a lasting impact on someone's health. Trauma in children is on the rise, with 1 out of 4 children currently experiencing a traumatic event. According to Cummings in 2017, 13% of children have experienced 4 or more traumatic events. The constructive self-development theory explains that trauma creates a variety of experiences that are individualized. This can make recognizing trauma difficult. Just as I explained earlier, students can react differently to trauma, where one student may be aggressive, another student may shut down completely. However, the theory does go on to further explain that all types of responses can be positively impacted by positive relationships. Recognizing trauma. An important first step in building trauma awareness is building trauma awareness. A study performed by R.B. Banks and Meyer in 2012 discusses utilizing trauma-informed practices to build meaningful relationships with students who have experienced trauma. 60 teacher candidates in this study had the opportunity to work with play therapists over the course of a semester. The teacher candidates were able to utilize trauma awareness, knowledge, and skills into the work they performed with the students. They utilized play movement and manipulation to engage students in the classroom. Nonverbal strategies were used to get students talking and to relieve stress within the classroom. Teacher candidate students were also able to build resiliency and recognize trauma more easily at the conclusion of the semester by taking the time to be more trauma informed. In 2017, Cummings, Adante, Swindle, and Meaden performed a study to explore knowledge and skills that educators can utilize in the classroom. The participants were 14 community-based service providers in the Midwest, explained through interviews the importance of recognizing trauma, in large part due to the impact it has on the children. They concluded by saying that it's accompanied by paying attention to the children and the signs that they exhibit. The more time that we spend focusing on our students and being able to read their cues, the better equipped we are to build these relationships. Kayla Ricosi in research in 2019 discussed the story of Josie, who had sustained childhood trauma. Josie later went on to become an educator herself, and she explained that she did not feel understood and wished that educators had took more time to get to know her. She felt the trauma was not understood then, and there still is a large gap with what educators and school districts know. The more informed educators are with trauma, the better able they are to build lasting relationships. What are the benefits of relationships? Jennifer Dodds in 2013 utilized 2 separate studies to show that relationships are at the core of meeting students' needs who have sustained trauma. Interviews with 182 students with emotional and behavioral disorders were asked what helped them through school. The other study surveyed 30,000 youth who experienced physical and sexual abuse in unstable homes. Students in both studies reported benefits of physical, emotional, and academic health based off building these strong positive relationships within the school setting. An additional study performed by Jennifer Dodds in 2015 focused on the benefits of school connectedness, with a primary focus on teacher-student relationships. The major theme that emerged, like from the previous study, was the need to establish caring connections with teachers at school. She further went on to discuss how specific caring behaviors were demonstrated through the use of validation, flexibility, understanding, and empathy. For the area of lowering stress levels, Kristen Souders in 2018 cited research on adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. It's pointed out that when students are operating under stress, it can impair their behavior learning, as well as their physical and mental health. In order to reduce these levels of stress, a safe environment is crucial, which is achieved in large part by students feeling a sense of trust and belonging with their teachers and with this classroom. And this is established through building positive relationships with teachers. So in turn, positive relationships lead to a safe environment, which can lead to lower stress levels, which is crucial for those who have experienced trauma. We also know that relationships have many benefits on the social aspect of things. But what about on academic performance? A study performed in 2016 by Flyer, Joglin, and Toetzi focused on this aspect. They looked at 15 fifth grade classes and observed them looking specifically for dyadic interactions. The results of this study showed an improvement by 0.05% with students who received consistent interactions with the teachers. The more interactions students had, the higher their achievement levels soared. So, forming positive relationships. It's clear that relationships make a positive impact on students who have sustained trauma. The next step is forming supportive and trusting relationships with them. Travis Wright suggests that educators recognize self-protective factors of each child, show interest in their lives, and engage in one-on-one interactions. These positive relationship skills allow them to interact not only with adults, but with the peers as well. Scott Larson conducted a study in 2005 on what behaviors they feel they needed most in relationships from adults they interacted with. He utilized troubled youth, had them watch videos of interactions between adults and youth and rate the interactions. The top evaluated behaviors that were illustrated by the adults was having a calm and pleasant voice, offering to help, joking around, and initiating positive feedback. Attunement, which is described by Allison Warsoff and Nancy Rappaport in 2013, explained that relationships promote curiosity and learning. Educators can utilize attunement. They allow students to feel safe and build trusting relationships with them. Educators who practice attunement pay close attention to the child and take notice of changes in their behaviors and academics. When educators know their students, they can respond in a manner that ensures the students feel understood and respected. Warsoff and Rappaport also suggest utilizing playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy to build strong relationships with your learners. In order for educators to be effective when building relationships, it is important that boundaries are set and that they are healthy and clear. Alex Winnett in 2019 defines role clarity as the process of defining scope and goals of our relationships with students and then maintaining these boundaries that allow us to focus on what the task is at hand. It's important to note that educators do not take the place of a trained therapist, but rather model what healthy relationships look like. Clear boundaries build trust and help the students know what to expect. This also allows students to self-regulate. The methods that are going to be used in this study. The participants are a convenient sampling of 6 students, all boys, between the ages of 9 and 12, in grades 3, 4, and 5. Of the 6 students, 4 have IEPs, individualized education plans. The other 2 have positive support behavior plans. All students have documented trauma and were chosen for this classroom that the studies performed in based on their difficulties with academics and behavior directly stemming from the trauma they have sustained. In addition, educators are going to participate in this study. They were chosen by those who agreed to participate. An educator from each grade, kindergarten through 5th, will be chosen in order to ensure the elementary school is well represented. This study will take place in a trauma-informed elementary classroom. This classroom utilizes specific techniques when working with these students, such as the token economy system and therapeutic services as needed. The classroom is self-contained, but it is housed in a public school setting. In an elementary school, this elementary school also has a large portion that focuses on students who have emotional support needs. The design of this study will utilize correlational design to discover if there is a positive correlation between student-teacher relationships and growth in academic and behaviors. Data will be collected over 1 month. Specific data will be collected on academics. This will focus on grades prior to the study and comparing them to grades at the conclusion of the study. Artifacts and documents will be collected, including report cards and test scores. Excuse me. Since behaviors directly relate to the amount of instruction students are able to receive, a great deal of behaviors will be observed and documented. Specific behaviors that will be observed include physical and verbal aggression towards staff and students, elopement out of the classroom as well as out of the school, refusals to perform academic assignments or anything else in the school day, and self-harm behaviors. I will be observing these behaviors in the classroom by utilizing tally marks to indicate the amount of these behaviors that are exhibited on a daily basis. In addition, I will gather behavioral referrals and other types of documentation regarding specific student behavior. This documentation will allow me to create a baseline in order to see if there is any positive change in the areas of behaviors and academics. A bar graph will be used to illustrate the number of negative behaviors in the beginning of the study, comparing them to the number at the conclusion of the study. An additional bar graph will be used to illustrate grades from the beginning of the study to the end of the study to see if there is any difference or improvement. Additional data will also be gathered. Student interviews. Each student participant will be interviewed. The interview is roughly 10 questions and should take no longer than 10 minutes out of the school day. The questions will focus on what students believe a positive teacher-student relationship looks like from their point of view. It will ask them to think back to when they had these types of relationships and how they impacted them, their grades, and their behavior. Students will also be asked to share characteristics of what they consider to be a good teacher and what a positive relationship is. Interviews are being used in order to clarify questions with student participants as well as giving them the opportunity to expand on their answers. Educator participants will take a short survey that will take no longer than 5 minutes in order to accommodate their busy schedules. Educators will be asked to determine the importance of building relationships in the classroom, rate specific relationship building characteristics, and share specific instances they observed in the classroom when building these relationships. Cross-tabulation tables will be used to illustrate survey responses. Responses will be then tabulated into numbers in order to be easily analyzed. This will help show educators' views on relationships within the classroom, as well as students. All data from the beginning of this study to the end will be analyzed to see if academic and behavior growth occurred as student-teacher relationships increased. The interview and survey portion will assist in clarifying various relationship aspects that are beneficial.